Give me the power. Cool. Thank you, Juan. And hello, everybody. I'm Loie. Really nice to be with you all. Yeah, Juan, should I just give a little intro of myself while people still roll in? Cool. Yeah, so my name is Loie Taylor. I am forever a student of conflict. I have been a part of the crypto space for about 4 years. But before that, I was really passionate about conflict resolution. I still am. And I first got in touch with this practice when I was 19 or 20 years old and spending time in activist communities in my hometown. And I became a part of a restorative justice organization. And that's where I really developed my first attachment to the idea of decentralization. Even though I might not have called it that at that point in time, restorative justice really is the decentralized mode of conflict resolution. So in a lot of ways that primed me for being in the crypto space and what the value alignment is between conflict resolution and distributed technology. I have some slides to share with you guys, and I'm gonna try and do a good job of both letting people in to the Zoom room here and sharing my slides at the same time. So bear with me while I do that. And I think because I'm just letting folks in, I'm gonna leave this on the kind of back room of the Google Slides here rather than going into presentation mode. But if anybody is having accessibility issues and not able to see the text very well because it's smaller, please message in the chat and then I'll go into presentation mode so it'll be a little larger. So hello and thank you for being here. Thank you for having me here. I want to, before we get into anything, and I will give chances to participate and a little check-in and whatnot, but before we go to that, I want to just acknowledge the space that we occupy here in the realm of conflict resolution, and know that many have come before us, that we have cultural predecessors that we owe a lot of thanks to. One that I want to highlight is various peacemaking traditions in Native American communities. I believe that the Navajo peacemaking is a really interesting model, which I see so many similarities between that and restorative justice. So I'm not gonna read out this whole thing, but I will just give you guys a second to read over some of the words here as we see them relate to decentralized conflict resolution. Okay, that might give me a little time to accept people. So welcome to those of you who just got into the room here. In addition to the Native communities in the land where I call home, there's also my activist communities. I owe a lot to these generations of people. One of them that I respect a lot is a group called For the People. This is a group of direct action focused climate activists. And they have some amazing stuff in their accountability agreement that I just look to again and again, year after year. So this is a great link. I highly recommend going and looking at this whole accountability agreement later. It talks about call in culture and call out culture and just the importance of those. But I want to call attention to these couple of words. If we do not call out our own corruption and dishonesty, we cannot call out the corruption and dishonesty of the system in power. And this is a similarity I see with the crypto movement walking its talk and practicing decentralization, not only in our tech, but also in our communities, decentralization of social power and holding that horizontally. They also say a call out is a gift, not a punishment, because it allows the person who has made a mistake the opportunity to learn and improve their understanding and behavior. This I see as also related to our culture because celebrating failure is essential to like the open source movement. It is the the energy of testing in production, and that's very important to crypto culture. And in this session, I'm going to talk a little more specifically about harm reduction as well as like a partner to conflict resolution. And before I get into that, just want to honor the legacy that comes from the Black Panther Party. Was foundational in creating harm reduction programs, their survival programs of breakfast, as well as health clinics and amazing like early acupuncture resources in the West, as well as the AIDS crisis, like various activist communities surrounding that and supporting that crisis in the 80s and 90s. And if this works out, I want to share with us a little video from Dominic Barter. Oh no, am I gonna have an ad?
You a homeowner who wants more money?
We'll just let that roll and I will accept people. But Dominic Barter is also a lifelong student of conflict and is considered one of the people who coined the term restorative justice, which is a mode of conflict resolution that I take a lot from. So I wanted to share with you some of his words. Are you guys able to?
This process.
Are you able to hear the audio on this?
That's for you.
So, but you can hear it? Okay. Well, there's captions, so I will play it.
The thing that is restored is always connection within people, between people, and as communities. Because the thing that is most ongoingly damaged has been connection. Lots of other painful things may have happened or may happen as a consequence of that diminished or broken connection within people, between people, and in communities. But in my way of reading why this works as it does, it's connection that has been diminished or broken first. And therefore it is connection that we seek to restore first. And just as all the stuff that we don't like is a consequence of that diminished or broken connection within, between people and as communities, so the good stuff that we're creating the conditions for re-emerging is a consequence of connection within people, between people, and as communities. So since my reading is that everything that we find that we're able to track, observe, record, register comes in part from disconnection, I want to start with connection. So to the extent to which that word restore or restorative is relevant to this process, and all kinds of people have questioned whether it is the most accurate word to use. So I'm looking to restore connection within and between people and as communities. And then I'm looking for all the ways in which that manifests in new acts, which now symbolize connection, just as the old acts symbolize disconnection.
I love that final piece about finding new acts that symbolize connection, just as the old acts symbolize disconnection, and that we can find new rituals that serve us better. So thank you for dropping into this space with me. I'd love to hear just a little bit from you guys. I know we have a group of about 30 people, so we won't have time for check-in from everybody, but I'd love to hear from maybe 5 people, just quickly, like what was a potent learning for you so far in this Graviton, this several weeks that have happened so far?
Does my volume work?
Yes.
Groovy. I'm out on land. I disappear on Independence Day because of my PTSD. So I'm not sure if I have signal, but I really got a ton from hearing Morgan talk about how our heart emits an energy field of like an 8-foot radius, and how, yeah, it really helped me tap into the fact that I don't actually have like social anxiety. Never felt like the right word for the thing that I experience, because it has to do with people's like attention or energy on me. And just thinking about like the energy in conflict and attention and how energy is held and carried and moved and whatever, it just gave me like more of a lens to like the environments we're creating when we come together for like conflict and grounding and whatnot. It kind of opened my eye up. It just planted a lot of seeds. I don't know about it. It planted a lot of seeds to be thinking that like our 8 feet and other people's too, and like we pick up and feel on that like on a scientific level, and it impacts us. So that was pretty validating from an embodied sense for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Morgan was one of the sessions that I would have loved to attend, so thanks for giving me a piece of it.
Well, I'll just say that following on from Morgan's thing, I went back and started watching some of her videos, and I was struck by the painstaking care that she took. And I looked at the video, and it was like 6 minutes of acknowledgements. Like, here's my biases, here's the place where I'm coming from, here's all the stuff. And what that reminded me a lot of is, if you look at like Hindu mythological books or philosophy or anything, they spend a ton of time like setting this whole thing up. There's called the purva karma. It's the thing you say before, like, this is the setting in which we are operating. Do you know what I mean? And so for me, it was very cool, because I feel like a lot of times we jump into these sort of Graviton sessions, and I liked how you spent some time saying, here's who I am and whatnot. I just really, if you listen to smart people talk, they're almost always putting a ton of context at the beginning before they actually give you the answer to whatever it is that they're teaching you, right? So I won't say necessarily it was in the Graviton training, but I've been in all the Graviton trainings from the beginning. So what I've noticed is the ones that are the most impactful upon me, like Morgan's, are the ones that you know, really set up the setting like you did just now, and you know, like Morgan and others have done. So I'm just sort of speaking in a general sense. So I think that was maybe the thing that's jumped out at me from all of this.
Thanks, Durgadas. Do we have maybe one more check-in before moving on?
Yeah, I wanted to say in the deep democracy session, I was really moved by the idea that in doing these kinds of organizing that I guess it kind of seemed to me that naturally the thing that one would be striving for would be reconciliation or agreement. So it was really powerful to me to have it pointed out that in public organizing and also in personal life that it's really important and healthy to voice disagreement and to know what your no's are. And I thought that was really powerful. That it's not just about everybody trying to figure out how to agree or to manufacture consensus, but to like actually like make sure everyone's being heard.
Amazing. Thank you. It takes a lot of courage to voice those things. And it's amazing that this space is building that courage for people.
For me, what I learn is that I am a long life student of conflict, but you always continue learning. And I really like the multiple voices that we've had. I like the session also of Lynn when she talks about lowering the waterline to let the unconscious be more visible. And the difficulty that is to have a theory and to put it in practice, because maybe we can be really savant on conflict theories, but we also face a conflict, and sometimes all that theory that we talk, we end up having the same things that we can identify and that we know in the theory, like having instinctive responses, maybe fighting, flying from a situation, or fawning or freezing. So it's like, okay, I know that this happens, but now this is happening to me and I am hyper excited, and I don't know how, and I recognize that I am hyper excited or hyper aroused, but at the same time I am somatizing it. And it's that we are all humans, and even when you know about conflict management, you can still experience conflict and experience it as a very complex situation.
Amen. Thanks, Juan. Thank you all. And as we go forward in the rest of this session, I'm very interruptible. Like as a person and a speaker, if something is like calling out to you and you want to unmute and like talk over me even to get me to notice that you want to speak, I'm totally cool with that. I really like participatory sessions. I'm going to be asking you guys some questions. So please feel free in this space, like family even, to chatter over each other. I want voices to feel liberated here. So I would like to spend just a short time like talking about restorative justice theory and a little bit of like what I did last time I taught at Gravity. But I'm going to do it kind of fast because I'm really excited to talk about harm reduction, and I want to get to time for that. So as I said before, I come from like restorative justice is my like intellectual lineage as far as facilitator training and how I learned to facilitate conflicts. And the theory that's really at the core of it is that dispute resolution can be fully decentralized, and that means even decentralizing away from like a judge or a mediator, and recognizing that a judge is a very centralized party, and even a mediator is a point of centralization. And so we can have these conflict navigations where all there is a facilitator, and they are getting the participants, the stakeholders, to talk to each other rather than through you as a mediator. And the other core piece of it is that it focuses on the present moment. We, in restorative justice, we use this question a lot. how are you now in relation to the conflict that happened? What is it that you would like known about how you are now in relation to that? And that really helps us to focus on impact over intention, because people can always, no matter anyone's intentions, it's how people are impacted, which accrues to the present moment. That really is what we need to address, and has, you know, the nuggets of potential healing is there. I'd like to just shoot this out to you guys. Who do you think knows the most about how a conflict should be resolved in any one conflict? I hear a voice clearing, but I don't know if it's getting ready to say something. All right, well, this is what I think, and this is what restorative justice thinks too. It's the folks that are most closely involved, people that are most deeply impacted. They're the ones who know. They're the ones who know the most about how to resolve it. Okay, I have another question to fire at you. How do you think people are most likely to follow, you know, an action plan, a healing plan, sentencing, restitution? Yeah, what would be an element that would make people most likely to actually follow through with that?
Them being a part of cultivating it.
Bingo. Yes. Why is it important to resolve conflicts? Is it PR?
To overcome obstacles and move and include no voices.
Yeah, that's great.
Because we grow from it.
Yeah, snaps to that.
You can create change when you resolve conflicts.
Heck yeah. Thank you.
Because it's a learning process.
Yeah, learning. Yes, and improving, right? We can actually like cure the state of unhealth that led to a conflict, the state of unhealth that even made it possible for such a conflict to happen. Recognizing a conflict as a symptom. So these are the theories of restorative justice, right? And I can see that you guys already have these so internalized. Whether you've heard that term restorative justice before or not, I can tell that you already have its wisdom inside of you. We also know in restorative justice that like some reasons that centralization doesn't work, recidivism, which is a fancy word for people re-entering the justice system and the punishment system again and again. People don't experience healing in court. One of my teachers taught me, she used to be a lawyer, and she said, I thought I was like bringing people for healing, and what I was doing is I was bringing them to war, and they never got healing in court. And so she left and started doing restorative justice. And then also like, this is massively profitable system for private justice system companies, which, you know, entrenches us deep in classism, racism, sexism, and all of these forms that oppress us. This is some of what we did last time I taught Gravity. We brainstormed different types of conflict resolution, and y'all have so many amazing ideas here. We did some breakout groups on kind of like which modality to use in which scenario. And then we talked about practical implementation. This is something that I really love to impart with folks. While you as a conflict facilitator may be so wise and and able to navigate really well if somebody comes to you, if there's no like policy in your community or your organization, that you might not get used as a resource. And so we talked about just how to set up a conflict resolution process in your organization. You know, there's these main steps that I see, which is selecting a method, right? You've got like all of these options up here. Then selecting facilitators, whether they are internal or external to your organization. Then coming to an agreement as a team to use that method. And then some of the cultural stuff, understanding that time spent resolving conflict is like, if you're in a work community, that's like working time and should be paid. And if you, just in your organization, your company, your community, having a culture of celebrating conflict and being intentional about that. And then the last thing, which not every org needs to do, but training for new facilitators is great to provide if you want folks internally to be able to facilitate the modalities you're using. This is all stuff that we went into deeply last time I did a session, and I'm happy to go back to it at the end of our sesh if we have extra time. But now that we've like gone through some of that stuff, I'd love to just spend the time going into harm reduction. And FYI, this slide is just an example of a policy, like a well-written out policy for an organization. So that's a nice one to look at. Before I go here, I'm just gonna check and see if we have anybody waiting. We have a couple, okay. So harm reduction. A lot of you guys have probably heard this term. I hear it in different spaces. And I'll go into the history of that a bit, how we came to this term. But first, I'd love to just hear a brainstorm from you guys. Like, why, like if you're considering doing some harm reduction to prepare someone for conflict resolution or as a step ahead of anything else, why might somebody not be ready?
Because my feelings are hurt.
Yeah. Gotta see those feelings and address those. Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to interact with the person that hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
And my underlying needs that created those feelings are still not met.
We can be easily triggered to get into a rivalrous scenario.
I want someone to validate my feelings.
These are amazing. I really appreciate the underlying needs one. Whoever said that, thank you. I think there's a lot of conflicts that some identities might perceive as just a conflict, and some identities involved in that conflict might be experiencing that as like a direct threat to their needs. Sometimes very essential life needs. That's great.
Yeah, for example, if I'm struggling to make a living, or you know, financially, you know, it doesn't matter how well-meaning you might be, I just might not have space, you know, for that if I've got a million other things going on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Great to recognize. So, looking at some like definitions of harm reduction, this term was really popularized in the realm of like care for people who use drugs. And what it means in those spaces is typically things like clean needle exchanges, safe injection sites, overdose prevention, you know, Narcan trainings, all of that. We also see it in a few other communities and categories. I see it in sexual assault and domestic violence contexts And typically what it means there is like suicide hotlines, having advocates who can assist you in going to medical appointments, and having folks to talk through safety planning with you. We also see it at protests in the form of like know your rights training, providing decompression space for like regulating your system when you're in an intense combative environment. The medics tent is a harm reduction space. We also see it in events at a lot of music festivals and other large events. And it looks like consent check-ins, easy, accessible drug testing, and providing a safe space to be too intoxicated and to address like, you know, what that means and make sure that medical attention is cared for if needed, and also that personal crises are handled. I really appreciate this recognition of how our identities impact how we experience harm. So I'm going to read this. Harm reduction recognizes that the realities of poverty, class, racism, social isolation, past trauma, sex-based discrimination, and other social inequalities affect both people's vulnerability to and capacity for dealing effectively with harm. So all those things may be holding you back from effectively dealing with a harm, dealing with being harmed. So quick check from y'all. What type of conflicts do you think might require some harm reduction ahead of going into conflict resolution?
Sorry to always pipe up here, but I do find my approach to this has always been, I feel like if people understood the context of how all of this harm came to be in terms of a cultural sense, that it might actually assist them in parsing it in some way, like, oh, my society, my state, my country, my whatever, you know, Juan lives in a country with the longest civil war in history or something, you know, it's like, I need to understand like that he comes from a certain kind of place. So he's going to carry with him a certain thing. Do you know what I'm saying? So I feel like if I can parse it out, like, and I come from a family of autism, so they're going to be emotional stunting that I'm just not going to get from a family that wasn't autistic. And you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, there's just a lot of layers of that. If I just could understand and parse all of that and understand how it all sort of came to be for me, then it might actually be like, oh, okay, now I get it. I have context, and then I can sort of address that stuff in a way that might make it easier for me. So it's not like a needle reduction thing, but I'm just saying, if I just even, because I just find that we're so blind, you know, to all the, there's just seems like there's harm coming at us all from all directions. We don't know how to break it up into pieces. So if I could just at least understand what the components of it was, I might be able to then, you know, figure out strategies for addressing it. So that's always been my thing.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move to the next here. I want to just share that this movement of harm reduction shares a lot of cultural values with the movement that we are in, which is towards decentralized modes of conflict resolution. Both of these screen caps here are from I think it's a harmreduction.org website. So knowing that this is from their core 8 principles, harm reduction establishes quality of individual and community life and well-being, not necessarily cessation of drug use, which is the harm that they are focused on, not necessarily cessation of the harm as the criteria for successful interventions and policies. So looking at, you know, knowing that these type of harms may exist in our lives, and that's not, we're not trying to squash those out completely. We know that conflict exists. We don't want to completely eradicate it, but that we can move through it healthily. And then also this one on the right, we as a movement affirm the wisdom, dignity, and leadership of people most directly affected by these harms as the holders of the key to transformative change. I know you guys are on board with that one too, because y'all piped up so well about who holds the keys to solving a conflict. So this other little piece here, they all felt that the essence of harm reduction was not an expert-based undertaking, but rather a process of listening. This is from an article on the early days of harm reduction in the AIDS crisis, and some of those formative community organizers, understanding that it's about listening to people, and that's where the wisdom is, not about experts coming in from the outside. In the sexual assault and domestic violence space, we know some things. Harm reduction for sexual violence is very different from primary prevention. It's a method to reduce the impact of sexual assault attempts. Primary prevention, on the other hand, works to reduce prevalence by preventing it from happening in the first place. So I find this to be a really useful term, primary prevention, like versus harm reduction. So what that looks like in the sexual assault space is maybe consent policy and enforcement of that in gathering spaces, promoting equal prosecution of sexual assault and domestic violence as we have in other crimes. And that is separate from what the actual harm reduction looks like. In the space of drug abuse, harm reduction, I'm going to read this again because I it's so good, and I know I read it to you before, but I think that we deserve to hear it another time. Harm reduction recognizes the realities of poverty, class, racism, social isolation, past trauma, sex-based discrimination, and other social inequalities that affect both people's vulnerability to and capacity for effectively dealing with, in this case, drug-related harm. So on the other hand, what the primary prevention in that space looks like would be reducing the prescription of addictive medicines, providing housing for all, providing accessible and low-cost mental health care. So looking at that model, I wonder if you guys can help me answer these questions for conflict. In conflict resolution, what does harm reduction look like versus what does actually that primary prevention look like? I'm going to take a little bit from what you guys said above. What else? What else might harm reduction look like here? I see Wonka thinking. Well, what if we think about like what it reduces the impact of? Does that feel like something we can attach to? If you were to do some harm reduction with someone, a stakeholder in a conflict, what would your goal be as far as reducing the impact of what on them?
Maybe of their pain.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The pain is interesting because it's also very valuable information and how we relate to it. So.
I would say also focuses on a short-term action.
So there's one of the harms that I think about reducing is like just the visceral sort of pain of disconnection, of like missing one another, like not being heard and understood, and especially in spaces where I thought we were good and then I noticed a slippage there, right? Anybody else?
That's a great one. Thank you.
What about language? I may not know how to express that you hurt my feelings or that I'm in pain, but knowing that, how do I want to say this? Knowing that there may be ways in which that I can express myself may be necessary. Like, yeah, I know I'm hurt, but I don't know how to tell you that I'm hurt.
Creating space.
Yes, yes.
So harm reduction might be to, I don't even know how maybe to respond to your pain, but if I just created space where we could sit there uncomfortably trying to figure it out, then it might reduce the harm involved.
That's great. Yeah, a lot of times in conflict, we are so agitated and dysregulated in our nervous systems that like words, they aren't there. If you once thought you knew how to express feelings and pain to somebody, you get into a conflict with them, you're like, oh, okay, I don't have vocabulary anymore.
I remember this quote that when you are angry, you make the best speech that you can regret of.
I'm gonna write that down.
This is interesting also in terms of communication, like not finding the words, but often the conflict also arises because we don't understand each other and each other's context. So,
yeah. I think that's where we, yeah, context. Context, I'm just gonna write context on here. There's a lot there. But a facilitator can be great in helping identify some of the relevant context ahead of getting into a conflict res.
Harm reduction make me remember the trainings we got that was on mountaineering club, and when we start trekking, have a consensus around and knowing that there will be a facilitation after the event. Then we went to down the mountain, and whatever happens there, we knew that we will resolve that. That existence of space and time, and like, hey, like there will be that facilitation. People were only carrying the most important stuff, or it was maybe a liberating constraint, maybe, that we knew that, hey, we will only bring up the most important stuff and try to resolve that in the time if we can. That was also facilitating that, like that inner questioning, like giving that, hey, is it really a problem? Or is it like maybe two people looking to each other for a couple of seconds and then smiling? Maybe that solves in such, but when it's much more, yeah, like this.
It can kind of help you understand like what level of conflict resolution you actually need. And sometimes it's lesser or greater than you thought originally. So basically harm reduction just recognizes this is happening. This harm, it's happening. What can we do to mitigate the effects of it? And this is a possible flow. that a facilitator might go through, or an advocate, where they first gain info of the conflict. They triage, which means assessing the severity of it, right? Assessing what kind of care and attention it needs. If it needs some harm reduction, that would be the next step, and that would go before the facilitated resolution. I want to give you guys, I don't know, I'm not super familiar with Zoom breakout groups, but I did want to do some breakout groups here for a few scenarios. And let's see if I can orchestrate this. Okay, I should be able to do that. So why don't you, can I get a volunteer actually to, while I'm creating breakout rooms, I would love to have somebody read out these scenarios. Can I get a volunteer for scenario A?
I can read scenario A.
Thank you.
A political dispute breaks out at work. An influential leader remarks in response to a new law limiting neurodivergent support in schools that we shouldn't make special allowance for neurodivergent contributors. A father of a neurodivergent kid has taken up argument with the leader.
Great, thank you. Does somebody want to read scenario B?
Oh, I love bear markets. So bear markets have cut deep into an org, and they decided to make a 20% RIF layoffs. The people laid off.
By the way.
What's that?
So,
reduction
in forces. It's laying people.
Forces. Oh yeah, yeah. The people laid off are publicly protesting the decision. They all have other jobs and support systems. Anybody else?
Okay, I'll read scenario C. Two colleagues connect at a conference and have a one-night fling. The organization has a strict policy against this, although it happens from time to time and usually doesn't cause a commotion. For some reason, this time it has caused a big stir. So I'm going to create these 3 breakout rooms and have you guys discuss which players in these conflicts, which stakeholders in these conflicts might need harm reduction, if anybody. And we'll come back in 5 minutes. So I think that, oh, I guess I am assigning you guys. Sorry for my technical. Are y'all able to see the breakout rooms yet? I think Aloysius, you definitely should be able to see breakout room number 1.
I don't see a thing to click anywhere for it.
You gotta press the next button and open the spaces.
Okay. Oh, because I'm still in the assigning mode. Thank you. I'm usually a Google Meet person. Okay. Okay,